Welcome to the show. My name is Charlton with Big C. This is Charlton and Big C Sports, coming to you worldwide on the Big C Sports Network, on the #1 network in the United States of America. And Big C Sports has been voted the #1 sports show in the universe, according to Big C. And them good old boys down south, I want to say bienvenidos to all of our listeners in Latin America, also across the pond, and London, England, as well as Paris, France, of course. You good old boys in Canada, we love you in Africa, the Big C tribe. But there's no one we love more than the good old boys down south in the land of the free and the home of the brave on a beautiful February the 28th, 2020. Rondo Deportes, Big C. How's it going for you good old boys down south?
Well, Charlton, it's been so cold down here in the south. I'm thinking about being like my brothers up north in Canada and spend the night watching a little hockey.
Yeah, sometimes sleeping on ice is a better way to cool things off for a lot of good old boys too. I really appreciate the way the country is just coming together with all the heat that we're having and people trying to get rid of certain things that are in the air. But we all got to stay safe as much as we can. I want to say this show is sponsored by your Northern California Cadillac dealers, home of the all-new Cadillac Escalade, the standard of the world. And when you go by and test drive yours, tell them Charlton and Big C sent you, as well as the fleet of Cadillac cars. Big C Sports, also powered by Google and Alexa. Just say Google or Alexa, play Big C Sports Podcast. You will hear from our sponsors. You will hear welcome to the show. I will introduce Big C as the Mystic, and he'll do his thing. And I really appreciate the way things are growing with Big C Sports. You can follow Big C Sports on Xfinity, Comcast TV, Roku TV, Fire TV, Apple TV, and a lot of smart TVs all over the universe. Really appreciate that. Also launching a Big C real estate team on the real estate show in spring of 2020. The goal is simply to hit 100 real estate brokers put their properties on television, and that's an easy thing to do when you have access to it. So having a good conversation about that coming up today as well. I just appreciate so much going on in the world of sports, Big C. I love the fact that you brought up to my attention this Veterans Crisis Line. It's a line that helps people. And I know a lot of people are going through a lot of issues, and we have, medical teams all over the country saying prepare for certain, outbreaks. But I want to make sure that we give out this Veterans Crisis Line is 800-273-8255. That's 800-273-8255. Or you can text 838-255. That's 838-255. If you are online, simply go to veteranscrisisline.net. That's veteranscrisisline.net, and you can get some help. Big C, why is that so important to you?
Well, Charlton, as we look at this last weekday of the leap year of 2020 in February of Black History Month, the National Suicide Prevention Hotline number is a great opportunity for people to call and have an opportunity to speak to somebody when they're going through troubling times. But as we look at so many of our veterans that are homeless and are destitute and without the ability to call the National Suicide Prevention Hotline number, Charlton, our country right now is being stricken with an epidemic that's running around the world, and the coronavirus.
Yeah.
And many of our homeless veterans could be stricken by this, Charlton. Those people who have served so admirably to protect this country don't have a line of defense to protect themselves in these troubling times when their health is really at risk when they're outside in unsanitary conditions.
Yeah.
I know we're always wanting people to call, and because suicide has become such a horrific epidemic in this country, whether it's veterans, whether it's everyday layman citizens, Charlton. And the National Suicide Prevention Hotline number is saving lives every day in America, and I'm thankful for that. But we also have to find a way that the government hasn't found a way to protect our homeless veterans, Charlton, that are out there that are right now in wake of this coronavirus and other illnesses that may come, Charlton, to this country. So any way that we can help a veteran, whether it's giving them a cell phone to help them make a phone call, or even passing out a sandwich or a blanket. Always think about your veterans in America.
It's always so important. 800-273-8255. That's 800-273-8255. Or you can text 838-255. That's 838-255. If you are online, simply go to veteranscrisisline.net. That's veteranscrisisline.net. And you can get some help. So really appreciate the fact that we have that too. So much happening in this world of sports. I just, Black History Month is really important, and I love the fact that we're having that. But I want to get to the point where I want to really get your thoughts on some things that are on my mind. You just brought up this thing about homelessness. And California, I believe, according to Gavin Newsom, Governor Gavin Newsom, has over 150,000 homeless Americans. POTUS wants to build a wall, and we have people that don't have a home that are in the United States of America, and a lot of them are Caucasian. But there's a lot of interest spent on building a wall as opposed to building a home for people. And I want to just ask your thoughts. I know we say, hey, let's just watch the game. Who cares if the people having issues? I want to see what time is tip-off for the game. Does that ever strike your mind where we want to build a wall to keep people out, but we got places all over this great country where people can't even get in? Big C, your thoughts?
Well, Charlton, as I speak about veterans every day in this country and trying to find a way to get them to fight against suicide, a lot of that comes from homelessness, Charlton, destitute, not feeling that you have a way out. And when we know the homeless plight in America, and the president never addresses it, he's always talking about a menace coming across the border that are here to steal jobs, to take jobs and livelihoods away from Americans.
Yeah.
Who is taking the livelihood and jobs away from those homeless people who don't have a home nor can get employment, Charlton? Our administration never talks about that. It says even now our administration is attacking the Democrats, saying that they're causing the coronavirus scare in America, that it's not serious. They're causing the crash in the stock market. Our administration is more concerned about the money that it's making for billionaires than it is for the layman, everyday person.
Yeah.
And when we look at the homeless, not just in California, Charlton, but you can look anywhere across this great nation and see homeless people everywhere. I see them every day that I'm out. I see homeless people. I'm often trying to feed them when I go out early.
Yeah.
But this is something that is a pandemic in America, homelessness. Yeah. And what's the answer for it? I mean, it comes down to our government. Does our government care? Could our government build shelters to house these homeless people? Yes, they could, Charlton. Do they care to do it? No, because they look at them as an eyesore, as a non-contributor. If you give anybody an opportunity, they will be a contributor.
Yeah.
They just need to get put on their feet sometime.
Yeah, they got to get put on their feet sometime. But you don't address that problem, then it rarely gets addressed. I want to just juxtapose this, and I don't believe ignoring things or pretending that it doesn't exist makes things go away. But I want to juxtapose what's happening in this great country. This is Black History Month. Now, sports, we know, is a billion-dollar industry. I want to just bring to your attention, as Governor Gavin Newsom is talking about over 150,000 homeless people in California, and then he's having issues with POTUS about getting funding and what to do. There's a stadium in Southern California, and again, this is our industry, Big C, but we're not linear. This beautiful stadium down in Inglewood, the NFL stadium's coming together, and it is close to completion. The future home of the Los Angeles Rams and the Los Angeles Chargers, officially called SoFi Stadium, is now about 85% finished, and there are about 3,200 workers on the site daily making sure it gets completed. The cost for this nearly 70,000 square foot stadium, Big C, is about $5 billion. Now, I'm not saying they're going to take that $5 billion and solve, homelessness in California. But what's the paradigm shift we have to make as a country when it's okay to have 150,000 homeless people? That's the size of many cities in California. But one stadium that takes up about a city block is $5 billion. And I know that's private money, but we can't find a way to house people. How do we get that way, Big C? Your thoughts?
But as you said, it's private money, Charlton. You can't tell private industry where they have to invest their money. I mean, it comes down to a consciousness that people have to have, not just in government, as private citizens, and even in the corporate sector. That's what it comes down to. I mean, you're on the air because you want to talk about sports, and you want to rave that it's a billion-dollar industry. And then you give kudos to those stadiums that are being built. I mean, it's an 8-block facility that's being built down there. It's more than just a stadium. It's a complex. It will house the NFL Network, amongst other businesses that will be down there, hotels. But, this is any corporate center in America. I mean, it's like saying going downtown Los Angeles, downtown New York, downtown Dallas, any major corporate area, downtown San Francisco, and said, okay, you need to remove part of this infrastructure so that we can build housing for homeless.
Yeah, it's part of the solution that infrastructure deals with. But we know you got to go forward and try to create opportunity. And this is what I do like about it. The stadium is about a 300-acre property, Big C. Once housed by the Hollywood Park racetrack that's out there in Southern California, not that far from LAX. Also planned for the project site, as you talked about, is a whole new neighborhood that will hold shops. It's going to hold restaurants, hotels, parks, and an artificial lake, Big C, 2,500 housing units. I know it's going to be one of the most must-see living neighborhoods in Southern California, coming up compared to what Inglewood is now. And when we juxtapose it to the LA Forum, the Forum was a shining place for basketball, maybe a basketball mecca on the West Coast. But now the new way that the engineers are doing things, they don't just build a stadium anymore. They're building a whole neighborhood. I know we can't address housing with everything, but for that region of the country in LA, they are at least creating jobs, about 2,500 housing units also. That has to be a good thing. Is it a good or a bad thing, Big C? Your thoughts?
Well, that's the norm for anywhere that you go, Charlton. You're building housing. I mean, when you look at building that infrastructure around there, housing is just a part of Los Angeles. Every place that you look at is underhoused. I mean, there's a lack of quality housing in a lot of places, and when people want to live in a general area, they will develop those areas and put housing in there. There's a lot of housing that was already around that stadium.
Yeah.
The Forum is right across the street from it. The Forum is not going to go anywhere. It's still a usable facility. They hold concerts and everything else in there on a regular basis. So it's just going to be part of that new complex that's being built.
Yeah, in fact, the first event that's going to be housed there is going to be a concert by one of the famous singers, but I'm not going to mention her name right now, Big B, because they're not telling me to do that, but it's going to be a concert, as a lot of places do. But also, we talk about growing our economy. There's also a new college bowl game. I think sometimes we got to get back to you good old boys down south, Big C, so I don't want you guys in the south to get jealous of this. A new college bowl game in Los Angeles is going to be called the new SoFi Bowl in SoFi Stadium, the Pac-12 versus the Mountain West Conference. However, the Las Vegas Bowl is going to be the new site at the new Raider Stadium. I think it's called Allegiant Stadium down in Las Vegas. That's going to pit the Pac-12 Conference versus the SEC Conference, Big C. I know that'll give a lot of people in the country the chance to see that Pac-12 football can beat up on some of you good old boys down south, Big C. Your thoughts?
Well, Charlton, I really don't hold high hopes for that SoFi Bowl, Charlton, because when you look at the lack of participation at bowl games in California, and you think about bowl games in Southern California that have gone by the wayside. They used to have a bowl game down in Anaheim for years, and that bowl game went by the wayside. So really the only bowl game that had any action down there in Los Angeles was the Rose Bowl. Other than that, people down there are not interested. Vegas is a lukewarm situation. I mean, you're talking about bringing the Big Ten, the SEC out to Vegas versus the Pac-12. And who are you going to get? You're going to get the third, fourth-ranked team in the conference to be playing in that game?
I don't know how they're going to do it, but I know when they build new digs, and oftentimes you'll often say that people will go to schools down south because they have the on-campus stadium and they have all the amenities. And
when you look at the SEC, they already are signed into the Sugar Bowl. That's the number 2 team out of the SEC is contracted to go to the Sugar Bowl in New Orleans.
Yeah.
You know that the number 1 team out of the SEC is going to be in the football playoffs. It's just an automatic.
Yeah.
And so you're not going to get higher than a third-ranked, possibly fourth-ranked SEC team coming out west.
Well, there's a gentleman that runs the Pac-12 conference by the name of Commissioner Larry Scott, and he's optimistic about it. I mean, of course he has to be. They're going to put him up in some nice digs, Big C. I'm sure wherever they fly him around on a private plane, he's going to have the best of everything. But he is trying to address the issue of low attendance at times in some of the venues. But I do think if you have, and I want to ask your thoughts next on the NFL, but if you tell high school kids that if they come to a certain program on the West Coast, they'll get a chance to play in arguably the 2 newest stadiums in the NFL. They have all the amenities, and it's just another avenue of selling good things. But he believes that because the Pac-12 is right here in the backyard, it's going to be a reason for more programs to stay here. It's not just the Rose Bowl that's exciting. Also, people still like the Holiday Bowl. It just depends on who's playing there. But if you think about what Larry Scott is trying to do, it's ironic that he's trying to build the interest in Pac-12 conference around an NFL football stadium as opposed to on-campus stadiums that I think you've talked about has been one of the reasons for the growth in the SEC. Big C, your thoughts?
And that's not going to work. That's not going to sell kids on coming to a university saying, okay, we're going to go play one game a year, a bowl game in an NFL stadium. It's done like that all over the place. If that was the case, you look down in Atlanta where they have Georgia Tech right down the street from the Mercedes Dome. If you look in New Orleans where you have Tulane right down the street from the Mercedes Dome there in New Orleans. I mean, even look at UTI, University of Texas Arlington, right in the same city as the Cowboys Stadium. It doesn't work in trying to put a college game into a pro stadium. It doesn't have the same draw appeal because all around the country, where you look at every pro stadium, college teams do not like to play in them because they don't belong to them, and so they don't get all the revenue.
Yeah, it's a lot like when you mentioned the AT&T Stadium. I think USC and Alabama will actually kick off at Jerry Jones' place, and so they've tried that before. I don't know if we really have sellouts. I don't think Oregon and Auburn sold out when they played last year to open the season. I don't know if that was Atlanta or Dallas, but I know they had a neutral site. I want to just bring this up to SoFi Stadium. It's an enormous venue for non-playoff of football bowl games, Big C. 70,240 seats, and many conferences already have expressed the desire to want to come play in the new digs. And I think as long as, I mean, that's exciting. But if you are playing in professional football venues, they've tried that already at Levi Stadium in San Francisco. Well, even the 49ers never sold out until this year. But if you price people out, you're not going to get college kids to come spend their dorm stipend on a football game. Big C, your thoughts?
Well, the thing you have to understand, Charlton, why college teams with on-campus stadiums are so successful is that you have access to 20,000 members of the student body to come right into the stadium. When you think about what SoFi is, what campus is it located close to?
Yeah.
None. Most likely it's Cal State Fullerton, which does not even have football anymore.
Yeah.
That's the closest college to that SoFi Stadium. You look at Las Vegas Stadium. Las Vegas, the UNLV is a long ways away from this new stadium that they're building down there in Las Vegas.
Yeah.
And matter of fact, the Sam Boyd Bowl is a long ways away from the university also. That's the reason why the student body never went there.
Yeah.
You can build the most lavish of stadiums anyway. Look at Oxford Stadium there in Corvallis, Oregon, or Eugene, wherever it is.
Yeah, Eugene, Oregon.
That stadium's always packed. Look at the student body attendance in that stadium because all they got to do is walk from the dorm, walk 200 yards, and they're in the stadium.
Yeah.
Versus you look at USC, that stadium, and even UCLA out in Pasadena, that's nowhere near Westwood.
Yeah.
But when you come down to the south, you look at the University of Texas. That stadium is right on campus, right there in Austin. The University of Oklahoma, right on campus, and all throughout the SEC.
Yeah.
All of those stadiums on campus. The Big Ten, Michigan would never get over 100,000 people in that stadium if it was not on campus.
Yeah.
But when you have 42,000 campus students, Charlton, you know how many students you're going to get into every game.
Yeah.
So when you talk about going out using somebody else's facilities, who does that attract? It might attract some corporates saying, hey, we got luxury boxes in the stadium, blah, blah. But it does not appeal to the student body. The student body is not going to get out and start using Uber or Lyft to get to a game when they don't have transportation because you put it at some off-site.
Yeah, I was talking, and as whether Larry Scott listens or not, I was just saying it's all about economics. California, it has about 700,000 people every year that leave the state because it's too expensive to live and people can't buy a home. In fact, in the Northern California region, in the Sacramento Valley, is the number 2 highest rent region in the United States of America because people from the Bay Area come, driving up prices. It's just hard for people to live, and that has a lot to do with a lot of things. I want to touch on something because of Black History Month, and you were prescient enough to bring it up. I believe you talked about it on Wednesday's program, Big C, and then I, doing some things late yesterday just to make sure that what had come through, I wanted to have it done before I did the show about Congress, voting to get this done finally after 50 years with Curt Flood. So I want to get Big C's thoughts on Congress. Lawmakers on Thursday, they pushed for a Curt Flood enshrinement in the Baseball Hall of Fame, but you brought this up on a Wednesday, and I just wondered if some of them good old boys will listen on there and decided to do their thing on Thursday. Big C, your thoughts?
Well, I mean, something about Curt Floyd is long overdue. When you think about the most integral person in the advancement of salaries of major league players,
Yeah.
that's Curt Floyd.
Yeah.
You know, from the time that he petitioned Congress, well, not Congress, but the Supreme Court,
Yeah.
in suing the Major League Baseball
And they
because of
lost it at
antitrust laws.
Yeah.
The average salary in Major League Baseball was $25,000. $25,000. And back at that time, 1970, it was a decent salary.
Oh, yeah.
But $25,000 was all that they were making. This past season, the average salary was $4 million.
Yeah.
So when you think about the growth because of Curt Floyd, not just in Major League Baseball, the NBA, NFL, the National Hockey League, Charlton,
Yeah.
he drove up the salaries for everybody because he is the grandfather of free agency. A black man allowed every athlete, professional athlete in America to
Yeah.
become rich.
Yeah.
And you think about being prescient enough to understand that. And I think that was baseball's ultimate pushback against Curt Floyd.
Yeah.
That a black man forced them to pay everybody else when blacks were ostracized
Yeah.
from Major League Baseball for decades, kicked out of the game, not allowed to play, you know, and racially, you know, hit when they came into the game, Charlton.
Yeah.
But to have men of color be the most dominant presence in Major League Baseball, every time you go to the negotiation table,
Yeah.
it's because a black man provided that opportunity for you.
That's so important. And a lot of times, I mean, some people know about it, but you would think it'd be much more known of. Curt Flood, he refused the trade with the backing of the Players Union Executive Director Marvin Miller, filed a federal lawsuit January 1970. He challenged the reserve clause. The Supreme Court actually ruled against him in a 5-3 decision. A lot like what the good old boys, Mitch McConnell, and them good old boys are doing today, Big C. That was in 1972. But the justices did agree that Curt Flood's his arguments had merit, and that had he been a white man, he probably would have won first time, Big C. So they could not intervene, they said, because it was up to Congress to alter the antitrust exemption created in 1922, and when the Supreme Court ruled that baseball was not interstate commerce. But we know it is. They go all over the place. They used to take buses back in the day, and just like a lot of other things, they knew they just didn't want to deal with it. But I'm glad that it took him as a man of color. I know we're talking about Black History Month, but for 50 years, people have gotten so wealthy in the hundreds of millions of dollars, basically, for athletes. And to trace it back to one man, and it's amazing that they don't already have more acknowledgement about him when he's the reason that they make the money. Why is that the case, Big C? Your thoughts?
Well, when you think about the invention of black people in America,
Yeah.
how they have forced the hand of mainstream society to change. They've always been hidden, Charlton. They've been pushed to the side.
Hidden figures.
The last thing that Major League Baseball wanted to say is that the reason that they have to do things the way they do is because a black man forced them to do that.
Yeah.
It's that unwritten rule is that, you know, we don't want to talk about it.
Yeah.
We'll let it go by, but we don't want to talk about it. We don't want to give the acknowledgement that this was made, you know, because of him.
Yeah.
It's just like in the NBA, and you think about the early entry into the NBA. A black man, Spencer Hayward, did the same thing.
Yeah.
Challenged the league's policy that you could not enter the NBA early. And so as we think about all these young millionaires when they come out of college early, when they would leave high school years ago, it was because of two black men willing to put their careers on the line and threats to their life for the good of the many,
Yeah.
not the need of the one or the few.
Yeah.
And so they thought about everybody. They thought about how it would be in history. If they win, how everyone would benefit from it. And they may lose their careers, which Curt lost his. Spencer was allowed to play. But many players, Charlton, have benefited over the decades financially from the moves of those two black men.
Yeah, it's amazing when you think about that. I want to bring this up because it's so important. The players' unions, and you mentioned this, but I want to make sure that people get this, because I saw some programming today, and I thought that we were here, you know, more of it, but people give it like 2 seconds, Big C. But players' unions from the NFL, the NHL, the NBA, and Major League Soccer had representatives at Thursday's news conference. 102 members of Congress signed the letter to the Hall of Fame, and Miller was elected to the Hall last year by the Modern Era Committee. An encouragement developed for Curt Flood advocate, Big C. Curt Flood, the letter to Kun is on display in Cooperstown. But I just want people to know, I know we get caught up in who's bigger and stronger and faster, as I had looked at some of the things happening with the NFL Combine, and there's nothing wrong with that. People are going to talk about how big, strong, and fast somebody is. But I thought for the last Friday in Black History Month, these guys are talking about how much money they're going to sign for when they get drafted, Big C, and no one even brought up the reason that they're able to make that happen. And I just think there's a lot more to be desired. I know everybody has their own choice. Do you ever think that even if he is given that they'll honor him more so by maybe putting some type of a plaque on everybody's jersey? That wouldn't hurt, Big C. Your thoughts?
No, they won't go that far. If Curt gets inducted into the Hall of Fame, it will be a posthumous ceremony, Charlton, after, the man is not alive, and so his family would be there representing. But Major League Baseball is not going to take it further than that. They're not going to dedicate anything beyond that to him or his what he has meant to the history of the game.
Yeah, well, I would love to see some more of that happen. I just think sometimes we have to be the reason that it happens. Before we get into the Big C timeout, also known as the Big C pause, I really appreciate the fact that you and I started in the Big C Sports. It was leap year of 2015, Big C. So actually 2016 we started it, even though we had started doing the show together back in 2015. And now that we're coming up on the same month that we started Big C Sports, I mean, you can look back 1,000 years from now, anywhere in the universe, and you realize that everything has a start. And I really appreciate the things that came together that made that happen. And going forward, there's a lot of good things that are going to happen. It's about just sticking to it and going forward. And I really appreciate the fact that we have this platform that we speak on today. I want to just touch on that fact, and that for people going forward, we always talk about Black History Month, and we talk about things that already ended. What's your hope for things that are starting that we can also be a part of that happening on a national level, Big C? Your thoughts?
Well, Charlton, I mean, just to be prosperous, to continue on, to have health, and to be knowledgeable about what you're addressing on the air. I think that's the most important thing, is that when people tune into whatever media outlet, sports outlet that they listen to, is that they expect to hear honesty and integrity when they're listening. They want to hear some knowledge. They want to learn some things that they have not known in the past, or refreshment of what they may have known before, Charlton. And so that's what I look forward to more than anything else, is that I can keep striving to get better, and be more knowledgeable at what I deliver to our listening audience.
Yeah, and I know that that's just our own flavor. I would hope that some of our other brethren could just sit down and realize arguing with each other and yelling louder doesn't mean that you know more. It does to make your co-host look bad. I don't know what guys get out of that. It's like the dozens brought the television, and then when we get that, a lot of them look like us and they complain that we don't have opportunity. And when we do, we tend to tear each other down. I don't like that at all, but everybody has their own choice. I want to touch on before the Big C timeout, and I want to follow up with that question. I want to do the Big C timeout, also known as the Big C pause, and then I want to come back and I want to ask you, what is it? Is it manufactured? Is it really something that's deep seated? When you're giving people an opportunity, why is there the need to go at each other and tell somebody, let me explain something? No, you're wrong. No, you don't understand. I don't like that, but that seems to be what's happening. We'll take the Big C timeout. We'll be back in just a moment. All right, we are back from the Big C timeout, also known as the Big C pause. You can follow Big C Sports 24 hours a day, 7 days a week on the #1 podcast network in the universe, iHeartRadio podcast. You can follow Big C Sports on Apple Podcasts. You can follow Big C Sports on Google Podcasts. You can follow Big C Sports on Spreaker.com. And the apps that I love are by Google and Alexa. Just say Google or Alexa, play Big C Sports Podcast. You will hear from our sponsors. You will hear welcome to the show. I will introduce Big C as the Mystic, and he'll do his thing. And I really appreciate the way things are going with Big C Sports. You can follow Big C Sports on Xfinity, Comcast TV, Roku TV, Fire TV, Apple TV, and a lot of smart TVs all over the universe. Also really happy to and excited about some of the background conversations launching a real estate listing show in the spring of 2020. The goal is simple: get 100 real estate brokers to list their properties on television. It makes you more of a standout. And no one's saying stop doing mailers. No one's saying stop knocking on doors. No one's saying stop doing some internet advertising. But when you put things on TV, it really makes you stand out, and I really look forward to that happening. So, Big C, before I get into the NBA schedule, you worked in broadcast many, many years. When I watch a basketball or a football or a baseball game, mostly the play-by-play and the color analysts, they're there to feed off each other, to compliment each other. Juxtapose that to oftentimes what I see on television, it seems like they're there to argue each other and shout each other down instead of just saying, look at the facts. That make any sense, your thoughts?
Well, you have to understand what you're looking at is a scripted production. These people go into production meetings. They just don't walk out there on the sideline and say, let's start talking. They go over what they're going to do. They talk about the type of banter that they're going to use throughout the broadcast. So as you're thinking that it's genuine, Charlton, it's not always genuine. Most of it is scripted.
Yeah, well, I think that's part of, well, people can Google if someone knows what they're saying. You don't have to shout people down to be right. 1 + 1 is always 2. It's never going to be 7. I want to touch on tonight's NBA schedule. It's the final Friday of Black History Month. And in leap year, until the next 4 years come around, Big Z, tonight's schedule, Minnesota is at Orlando. Brooklyn is at Atlanta. Charlotte will be at Toronto, defending NBA champion Toronto Raptors. Game's already underway. Dallas will be at Miami. Sacramento Kings will be at Memphis. Oklahoma City is at Milwaukee. That's a game where you have the great Chris Paul and Giannis Antetokounmpo, Big C. Give me your feeling. Chris Paul's playing like he's still trying to prove that he has it, Big C. Your thoughts?
Well, you have players playing two different positions, Charlton. Giannis right now, the front runner for the MVP of the league. Charlton averaging just at 32 points a game. Chris Paul is having a phenomenal year down at Oklahoma City. He's had a resurgence down there. He has that team in 5th place in the West, and no one expected that. Both of these teams are playing outstanding. Here it is with Milwaukee having a chance to be the 3rd NBA team to win 70 games in a season, Charlton. Actually, the 4th NBA team to win 70 games in a season. So, I mean, 2 outstanding teams that are playing much better than what people thought they would this year.
That's very well said. Also, we have Cleveland at New Orleans. Detroit is at Phoenix. Washington will play at Utah. And the big game tonight is down in L.A. Can the Clippers right the ship? The Denver Nuggets come to town, and they have a team that's they're just biting at the bits to be one of the top 2 or 3 teams in the Western Conference. Many people have felt that starting the season that the L.A. Clippers would get them. They thought it would be L.A. and then everybody else. But here's a chance. Is it must-win time for L.A., or are they still kind of in what they call they can wait and see for the playoffs? Big C, your thoughts?
Well, it's not must-win team, Charlton, for any team that's in the playoffs. It's not much win until you get past where we are 30 games from now when you're in the playoffs. Those are the only games that are must-win. It's about staying healthy and getting ready for the playoffs right now.
Yeah, it's about that. And I just wish everybody the best. And I know it's going to happen that no matter who wins tonight, the team that wins the NBA championship, they got to get into the playoffs and start winning. It's still right now just time for position. I want to touch a little bit, Big C, on, I know they have the combine going on in Indianapolis, and it's like an empty stadium. Of course, they could even put that in a small, a smaller venue, but they want to have the NFL venue to do that. Maybe they should have done it in Las Vegas. They may have had more people involved in it. But it's when I come up to this talk about what people need, I want to just start quickly because I really end the show today with some history of African Americans in this country and how many people don't even know who they are. Neither did I until I started Googling quite a bit. Buffalo Bills in the East, they talk about needing a wide receiver. And then also, they have the quarterback spot locked up with Josh Allen. Give me your feeling on Josh Allen, whether to get a wide receiver or not. There's also a guy out there by the name of Tua Tagovailoa out of Alabama, Justin Herbert. And then you have Jordan Love that played at Utah State. Not a lot of people know about him, but they played a game down in the swamp versus LSU, and they got beaten pretty bad. But he's still a good quarterback. So give me your feeling on these quarterbacks and which one you think would go where, and your opinion, Big C, your thoughts.
It's up in the air with these quarterbacks, Charlton. There's always speculation of who's going to choose what. Everyone knows every year that the draft is a crapshoot. There's always people who move up and down in the draft that shock all these proponents and so-called experts.
Yeah.
When you talk about what a team needs, Charlton, every team in the NFL needs to win, period. That's the bottom line. And, do you draft a player because of what the so-called expert said, he's the best player available, or do you draft a player that fits the need of your team?
Yeah.
And I think all the smart GMs draft players that fits the needs of their team. Just because you draft a quarterback, in the last 2 years, look how many quarterbacks have gone in the first round. And look at how many of those quarterbacks that have gone in the first round have had success.
Yeah.
It's less have had success than more.
Yeah.
The biggest problem about a quarterback going in the draft, if you're drafted in the top 10, then most likely your career is not going to be that good at the start of your career. You're going to struggle for 3 or 4 years in the NFL trying to get a toehold on the league and what the league represents.
Yeah.
The better you are as a quarterback, the later you're drafted.
As we get the chance to see players that have played in whether it's a Senior Bowl or seen them playing in bowl games, I know Tua, when I think about him coming out of Alabama, he's had so much success, but he tends to be on the back burner by a lot of people for whatever reason, because maybe there's that subconscious fear that he got injured in a college game. All it takes is another hit like that in the NFL. Are you still high on him having success at the next level, Big C? Your thoughts?
I think he's the best quarterback coming out in the draft. When you look at the body of work that Tua put up against every major college competition that he played against, you think about the 2 games that he played against LSU in his college career.
Yeah.
This guy in 2 games against LSU put up just under 900 yards passing and I believe 9 touchdowns. So when you talk about a guy's productivity, and LSU has at least 7 guys on their defense that's going to get drafted into the NFL.
Yeah.
He throws the best football in all of college football. You talk about an on-time thrower, a guy that can get it done. Show me the number of quarterbacks who have not been injured in college going into the NFL.
Yeah.
Half of the guys that are playing in the NFL had gotten injured to some degree in college. It's about being with a better team, getting protection. And in the NFL now, you can't tackle a quarterback like Tua got tackled while he was at Alabama.
Yeah.
There's safeguards in that now. So no one's taking a risk on him if you draft him. You're drafting the future of your organization that will be good for the next decade.
Well, I think about those numbers that he's had. I mean, all he's done has been in and around championship seasons, and even when he played at St. Louis High School in Honolulu, Big C. Justin Herbert, big kid out of Oregon. He's an intelligent kid. They really boast about his GPA being an academic All-American. I thought he was a solid quarterback for the Oregon Ducks. There were times when he just seemed to not be the emotional leader that they needed. I mean, that's just my opinion. And sometimes you need some fire and brimstone from a quarterback to get people in the right spot at times. And there's times that he's just a little bit too shy. I want to ask your thoughts. Maybe it doesn't make any sense, but does shyness matter if you're going to go into the NFL and you're going to lead men where people oftentimes will wear their emotions under their sleeve? You can't be a shy leader, or am I wrong about that, Big C? Your thoughts?
Well, I wouldn't call him shy. I just call him straight up inconsistent.
Yeah.
I saw him disappear in a lot of big games. The NFL every week is a big game. I saw Justin Herbert over a 3-year span disappear in games that would have won the Oregon Ducks the Pac-12 title, gotten them to the national championship games. I saw Justin Herbert the first game of the season got outdueled by a true freshman,
Yeah.
a guy in his first college game. That right there gave me a lot of hesitance about Justin Herbert being able to show up for the games that he should.
Yeah, and that he also lost to another freshman down in Arizona State, and that cost him a chance to play in the bowl championship series also. So Jordan Love, not a lot of people know about him. The young man came out of Utah State, and mostly if you go to Utah, you have University of Utah and then BYU. Those are the schools that get the mention. But Utah State played pretty decent football at times. I know they had a big game against LSU, the team that eventually won the national championship. And he didn't have the best game, but there's still a lot of people that like his arm strength. He's a tall guy. He can also scramble out of the pocket. Are you feeling Jordan Love, Big C? Your thoughts?
Jordan Love is the second best quarterback in the draft. Everybody is looking at Jordan Love this past season. Jordan Love this past season lost 9 starters off of his offense that were not around. Go back and look at him in his sophomore year, Charlton, at Utah State. He was as good as any quarterback in the country. Statistically, he was right there with the top 5 quarterbacks in the country. But when you lose your offensive coordinator, you lose your head coach,
Yeah.
and you lose 9 personnel off that offense that you're on, yes, you're going to have some struggles. But technique, tools, and all of those things, Jordan Love can play in the NFL, and to me, he's the second best quarterback on the board. The best thing for Jordan Love is not to be drafted in the top 20, Charlton, to fall into that bottom, third of the first round.
Yeah.
You'll go to an organization that has a solid foundation and will allow him to have a great pro career.
I want to get your thoughts on, because they talk about quarterbacks, and there's a kid by the name of Joe Burrow, and whether people say, he's braggadocious or not, a lot of guys have been braggadocious, especially when you win a national championship. But he's a grown man doing it too. Now, I remember a kid back at the University of Miami. I think his name was Patrick Walsh. He was actually out of Northern California, and he went down there and he was lighting the world on fire with Miami. But it's as if all of his wide receivers went to the NFL. So it made him look really good. You can say the same thing about Gino Torretta also when he played at the University of Miami. There's a lot of guys, even at USC, there's some quarterbacks that were drafted and made first-round draft picks, Big C, because they had NFL-caliber wide receivers to throw the football to. I'm not going to say that's the same case with the kid out of LSU, but do you think that maybe could he have had the same success instead of playing at LSU if he played at Arkansas, Big C, when you think about Joe Burrow? Your thoughts?
Well, I mean, if all ifs and buts were putting the nuts with a Mario Christmas in the beat.
Yeah.
You play football wherever you play football.
Yeah.
You look at Jalen Hurts. He left Alabama. He had a greater year at Oklahoma than he ever had at Alabama. I look at Joe Burrow. He had the greatest single season in college football history as a quarterback. You cannot knock that.
Yeah.
I mean, everybody can take there and dissect the young man any way that they want. But he had the greatest single season in college football history.
Yeah.
Now, last year as a player, if you were comparing him to Jordan Love had a better season in 2018 than what Joe Burrow did. So would that make him a better quarterback if he had been in the LSU system? We don't know. We have to go with the numbers that were there. But I do know one thing. Joe Burrow spent 3 years at Ohio State. And there were 3 different quarterbacks that he could not beat out at Ohio State. And one of them became a number 1 draft pick in the NFL. Another one's a wide receiver in the NFL. So when you think about opportunity, you have to be in the right place at the right time, regardless of what sport you're playing, to have success. You're not going to find success in every situation that you go into. You have to be the right fit. He was around a lot of guys that are going to go into the NFL as well as he is. It's just a matter of being with the right program once he gets to the NFL, which will lead to whether he has a successful career or not.
Let me get your thoughts on Hoskins, who had 50 touchdown passes at Ohio State, Big C. And now with the Washington Redskins, but everybody goes there to lose. I know they always have this idea that they used to be great, and of course they were, but Snyder has the helm now, and they just never have reached that rebirth, that renaissance like the 49ers had this past season. So you're feeling about the Washington Redskins, do they have the right quarterback in Hoskins? Because just because you're successful in college doesn't mean you're going to be the right system in the NFL. Are you still feeling him, Big C? Your thoughts?
Well, I thought Dwayne Haskins was lazy as a rookie in the NFL. He did not put in the work that he needed to succeed. You could see that in how he played when he got on the field. You have to have a sense of urgency. If you compared Dwayne Haskins to Kyler Murray and the way the two of them played, you could see a sense of urgency with Kyler Murray, that he grasped what he was doing offensively. I didn't see that or feel that from Dwayne Haskins.
Yeah.
I don't think he spent enough time in the facility prepping himself, working extra time, Charlton, with the receivers, getting his timing down, and you saw that when he was on the field.
You know, I was telling you earlier about how people feel they gotta have some type of attraction at the new SoFi Stadium in Southern California. So that the LA Chargers have not selected a quarterback in the first round since they took Eli Manning number 1 overall. That was back in 2004, and they traded him to the New York Giants for Phillip Rivers. So we know they have Tyrod Taylor right now, but you have guys like Herbert, you have guys like Tua. I know Tyrod Taylor has playoff experience with the Buffalo Bills, but they didn't like that, so they let him go also. But are you solid enough in Tyrod Taylor, or would you do something that I think may be foolish and go out and try to draft a quarterback when you have a playoff quarterback already, Big C? Your thoughts?
Well, the Chargers do have a starting quarterback in Tyrod Taylor. They have not said that they're going to go out and draft a quarterback in the first round. Anthony Lynn has made no indications of that. Everybody in the media is saying that they got to go out and sign a free agent quarterback. but you already have a free agent quarterback that the last time he was a starter in the NFL, he was a playoff quarterback.
Yeah.
And when you look at the free agent quarterbacks out there, Charlton, how many of them are playoff quarterbacks?
Yeah.
Not more than Tyrod Taylor.
Yeah.
So to say that the Chargers need to build from the ground up, I think that the Chargers will draft a quarterback. Will it be in the first round? I'm not so sure about that. They don't need to do that because you have Tyrod Taylor. Bring in a young man, get him second, third round. I mean, Jalen Hurts, I think, would be a marvelous fit out there with the Chargers out of Oklahoma because of what he brings to the table, and he's the same type of quarterback that Tyrod Taylor is. He can throw it, he can run it. He's been impressive. You know, with his growth in 1 year at Oklahoma, I think if he got an opportunity to go to another system that could allow him some time to learn and grow, like the Chargers, I think he'd be an outstanding quarterback on the West Coast, just like a Russell Wilson-style quarterback.
Well, we know when you build something new, you need people to fill the seats. I've always thought that Derek Carr was a decent enough quarterback with the Raiders. The Raiders just have a poor defense. If you're John Gruden and you're opening up that new stadium in Las Vegas, it'll be sold out for the first year, maybe even first 2 years. But if they keep having these 5-win seasons and 4-win seasons, people in Las Vegas will find something better to do after the next couple of years. So with the Raiders, let me ask you, would you still have Carr as your premier quarterback opening up that new stadium, Allegiant Stadium, or would you be looking at the draft and going forward trying to get more excitement for the next couple of years? Big C, your thoughts?
You know, what's going to be more excitement? What proves any college quarterback to be better than any starting quarterback in the NFL? As I spoke about in the opening of the show, when you look at the quarterbacks that have been taken in the first round over the last 2 years, how many of them have made it to the playoffs? And when you're talking about making a splash in a new city, just the team showing up makes a splash by itself. The Raiders need more than a quarterback. They have no receivers. You know anybody in their receiving corps? No. I mean, all you know on the offense is their running back. That's it, Jacobs. Their offensive line needs to improve. Their defense, they're not getting after anybody, and their secondary is abysmal. The Raiders need a lot of help beyond the quarterback. You can bring any big-name quarterback with the Raiders that you want. It's still not going to make them win if they can't stop anybody. And plus, Mr. Mahomes is in that division.
He's in that division, too. Where will Teddy, when you Bridgewater, I think about how all he's done is win. He was actually undefeated this past season for the New Orleans Saints, but there's still talk about Bridgewater. He's starting material, but you would think that more people would go out and grab him, Big C, and not keep it a secret. Do you think he's going to land on his feet, or will he always just be a guy that's a good backup? I think he's good enough to start. I think he's a dynamic player, Big C. Your thoughts?
No, he's going to get a 3-year contract once free agency start because he proved his mettle when he filled in for Drew Brees, went 5-0 as a starter. You got to understand his last year in Minnesota as a starter. They went to the playoffs. If not for an errant kick by the field goal kicker, they would have beat Seattle, and they could have been the team going to the Super Bowl that year.
Yeah, I know that. It's amazing how he really overcame. He had his knee pretty much torn up. There were a lot of people that were concerned about his health, let alone would he be able to play football again and start for another team. Look at Alex Smith. I'm not saying they had the same injury, but they both had horrific leg injuries. And then Alex Smith, I don't think he's ever going to play again. Doesn't make any sense. He had the
same knee injury that Deshaun Watson had.
I mean, it's tough when, Watson came back. Maybe with the way medicine is now, maybe he'll come back too. Maybe you're not losing sleep, and nobody is going to lose sleep. There's always talk about respect. Well, respect means money. Dak Prescott, there's so much talk about, even if they do sign him, not that he's an emotional player. If someone's going to give you $35 million a year, you take it, even though you may want 36 or 37. But it's still, he has to feel in the pit of his gut that he's never really the guy that they wanted in Dallas. It just seems that way, or would that be a wrong assessment? Big C, your thoughts?
Well, you can't say he's not the guy that he wanted. Dak Prescott wanted money. Dallas offered him a decent contract at the beginning of the season. He said he wanted more. I mean, they're going to franchise him in 2 weeks. They're not going to sign into a contract because Dallas has too many holes that they need to fix. So they franchise Dak Prescott. It allows them to sign other players. It gives them money on the table for Amari Cooper to sign him, and they need to get a tight end. But they can franchise Dak Prescott for one if they want to do it 2 years, and if he's still playing at that level, then they give him a long-term contract. But, I mean, it's no slouch getting franchised because he'd get $33 million.
Yeah, that's a lot of money. I'm sure a lot of people would take it. Last quarterback I'll talk about, because I really don't put a lot of emphasis on when they go to a combine and I see someone's how tall he is, how much he weighs, how fast he runs the 40, how high can he jump, how many times can he bench press 225 pounds. That doesn't tell me nothing until you actually see them playing against that competition that they're drafted to play against. But I still wish everybody the best. Tom Brady, to me, makes more sense if he can end his career in Boston. That's where he started his career, playing for the New England Patriots. If someone were to take him as just a 1-year fix, maybe 1.5-year fix, I think he stays in Boston. You have the same thoughts, Big C.
Well, I want to see Tom Brady in Boston. I don't want to see him anywhere else. I mean, the media is saying that he can go here, get $60 million for 2 years, wherever he wants to go. But, the thing about free agency and any player moving from a team, or even a coach leaving a team and going elsewhere, I think the media forgets to say they're not taking the players that were there playing with them.
Yeah.
So it's not going to be the same. And when you think that you can just pencil a player in and have all the timing and structure that he's had for a decade or more in another situation, it doesn't always work. When you look at the success that Teddy Bridgewater had in New Orleans last year, he spent a year sitting on the bench before getting a chance to play when Drew Brees got hurt.
That's right.
So he adjusted to the New Orleans system in practice and everything else. He knew the players. You look at any quarterback that has moved teams right away and get tossed into the heat and said he's not going to be successful because it takes time to learn that system, to get in the rhythm with those players. Tom Brady's best thing would be to stay in New England. The media said that the situation is sour. Tom Brady has never said that it's sour. Robert Kraft has never said that it's sour. Bill Belichick has never said that it's sour. You have a working relationship. You're not going home sleeping with your head coach or your owner.
Right.
Go home and hang out with your wife. That's what you do. So as the media constantly wants to build a story, and you think about how egregious the stories have become here in the off-season, because there's no football being played. The only thing you have to talk about is the combine. You don't have any live action stuff to talk about, so you have to create every story every day that you come up with on television, on radio. You have to create the excitement within your listening base to keep them attentive to what you're talking about. So the story has changed every day since the offseason has been over with Tom Brady. Everybody has a half a dozen teams that he's going to. Hell, you might get one of them right.
Might get
but
one
you
of them
also
right,
have to realize he has never left New England.
Never left. In the last 8 minutes on this Black History Month, I want to pay homage to Black History Month, honoring contributions from African Americans to the U.S. history. Among prominent figures are Madam C.J. Walker, who was the first U.S. woman to become a self-made millionaire, and George Washington Carver, who derived nearly 300 products from peanut, Big C, and peanut butter and so many other things that he's done. Also in celebration of Black History Month, began as Negro History Week, which was created in 1926 by Carter G. Woodson, a noted African-American historian, a scholar, educator, and publisher. It became a month-long celebration in 1976. The month of February was chosen to coincide with the birthdays of Frederick Douglass and Abraham Lincoln. Big C, your thoughts on how important that is for not only African Americans, but all people all over the universe. Big C, your thoughts.
Well, when you look at the contributions of African Americans, Charlton, worldwide, and what they've produced from their days in Africa to modern day here in the U.S. and around the world, African American citizens have always been solid contributors. And, we've been lost in the history books over time and omitted from many things and innovations that we've created to advance culture around the world, not just in America. And I think that's a sad sight that we live in 2020, is that the world, and especially America, is not willing to acknowledge all the advancements that black people have created to make life easier in this world and in America.
For everybody.
And until we get to that point in society that we can recognize all the contributions that blacks have made beyond athletics, then we'll always be in the backseat of society in this country.
It's so important. It's NAACP on February 12th, 2019. It marked its 110th anniversary, and that's so important. It was spurred by growing racial violence in the early 1920s. In the early 20th century, and particularly 1908 race riots that started in Springville, Illinois, a group of African-American leaders joined together to form a new permanent civil rights organization, the National Association for the Advancement of Colored People, and that was founded February 12th, 1909. It was chosen because it was the centennial anniversary of the birth of Abraham Lincoln. We know about heavyweight champion Jack Johnson. Big C became the first African-American man to hold the world heavyweight boxing title in 1908, and he held onto that belt until 1915. Big C, your thoughts?
Well, I mean, Jack Johnson, probably the most courageous African-American athlete in American history. As everybody wants to sit there and talk about the raves of a Michael Jordan and Jim Brown being the greatest football player of all time and Mamba mentality, all of those guys Charlton learned from reading about Jack Johnson. They didn't develop the fraternity that they had to be able to go out and be competitive and dominant just because they walked onto a court or to a football field. They read, they understood history, they understood what blacks sacrificed for them to get to that point. So as all the sports shows want to rave about the guys that they could show on the highlight reel, those guys that they show on the highlight reel were prescient enough to read about the guys who could not make the highlight reel.
That's very well. And one person that I'm really proud of, the first lawyer, you think about John Mercer Langston was the first black man to become a lawyer when he passed the bar in Ohio in 1854. He was elected to the town clerk in Ohio in 1855. Langston became one of the first African Americans ever elected to public office in the United States of America. And John Mercer Langston was also the great uncle of Langston Hughes, a famed poet of the Harlem Renaissance. And just a couple more before we have to close. People love talking about Rosa Parks, and she was credited with helping spark the civil rights movement when she refused to give up her seat on a bus to a white man in Montgomery, Alabama, 1955. That inspired the Montgomery bus boycott, and it's just amazing how things happen. I'll finish with this. Supreme Court Justice Thurgood Marshall was the first African-American ever appointed to the U.S. Supreme Court. He was appointed by President Lyndon Baines Johnson and served in the court from 1967 to 1991. Really am proud to say that I'm a African-American. I'm proud to say that I'm American. Everybody knows we have a lineage, and everybody has to be happy and whatever they choose to be happy about. But I really appreciate that. You can follow Big C Sports 24 hours a day, 7 days a week on the #1 podcast network in the universe on iHeartRadio Podcast. You can follow Big C Sports on Apple Podcasts. You can follow Big C Sports on Google Podcasts. You can follow Big C Sports on Spreaker.com. The apps that I love are by Google. And Alexa, just say Google, or Alexa, play Big C Sports Podcast. You will hear from our sponsors. You will hear Welcome to the Show. I will introduce Big C as the Mystic, and he'll do his thing. And I really appreciate the way things are growing with Big C Sports Podcast. Also launching a real estate show in the spring of 2020, looking to get 100 brokers to list their properties on TV, and that really makes you separate yourself from the people that don't. Big C, I want to have you just give me your thoughts as we close out, and then I'll get you back in the day on Black History Month. In the final minute, what are you most appreciative for, Big C? Your thoughts?
Well, Charlton, one of the things I'm very appreciative of is that we're able to celebrate our 4th and 1st anniversary all at the same time. An opportunity that we've had to expand the knowledge and insight of some people in the sports world.
Yeah.
To think that what we can bring to the table on a daily basis when we do our broadcast is insightful and people respect it.
Yeah, and I love that too. It's always important that you can speak to the universe, Big C. Back in the day, there was a man by the name of Drew Boudini Brown. He was known as Muhammad Ali's right-hand man, and he would always tell Ali, with all you got to use, how can you lose? Rumble, young man, rumble. Big C, what are you looking forward to in the sports universe?
What I'm looking forward to, Charlton, is that we don't have to be cookie cutters like everybody else, is that the information that we bring to the airwaves on a nightly basis when we do our broadcast is informative and insightful, and people appreciate it.
And I really appreciate that, and I feel the same. I wish everyone happy Black History Month, and may you all just do everything that your heart desires and make the most of everything you want to make the most out of life. You can follow Big C Sports 24 hours a day, 7 days a week on the #1 podcast network in the universe, iHeartRadio Podcast. You can follow Big C Sports on Apple Podcasts. You can follow Big C Sports on Google Podcasts. You can follow Big C Sports on Spreaker.com. And as we always tell you, there's never, ever an excuse for domestic violence. If you know any man or woman going through that garbage, please pick up the phone and call 911, because no man or woman should ever have to go through that garbage on their own. And as we always tell you on every Big C Sports Show, we thank you, we appreciate you, and we hope that you have a super fantastic day.